So hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Sheila Rabin and I am the Orchid US Community Specialist at Lyrasis. And in our session today on enhancing library services with artifacts in Orchid, we have special guests with us from the ARTiFACTS platform, which is a relatively new software that is integrated with Orchid. So we're getting the word out about artifacts. And if you want to hear more about Orchid specifically, we're not really going to go into depth with Orchid on this webinar. It's going to be more focused on artifacts, but we do have a Orchid specific webinar coming up on February 3rd. I just posted the link to that in the chat. So if you're interested in coming to that, go ahead and register. And we can go more in depth with Orchid on that session. Just as a little heads up for some logistics, we will be using the poll feature in Zoom today, so look out for a few poll questions throughout the presentation. If you have any questions as we go along, please do feel free to type those into the chat. You can chat with me or any of our co-hosts from ARTiFACTS. And we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the session. And I'll also ask that everyone stay muted and off camera during the session, just to preserve our recording quality. And of course, this session is being recorded and will be made available to everyone afterwards. I think that's about it for my introduction. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and hand it over to the artifacts team, Dave, Emma, and Jason.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Sheila. I'll just turn my video on briefly to wave everyone a hi, and then I'll turn it off to again preserve bandwidth. Let me share my screen, and so we can get started. And let me put this on full display. Is everyone seeing the full display here?
Yep, looks great.
Great, thank you. So Sheila, thank you for your introduction and inviting us to speak with the group today. And I would like to thank all of you for attending today's session and those of you who will view the recording afterward. Emma, Jason, and I are very grateful for the opportunity to speak with you about the ways artifacts and Orchid can enhance the services your libraries provide for your research communities. Our agenda begins with an overview of artifacts, just a brief orientation. Then Jason will dive into a demonstration of some of these capabilities with our live system, and he'll also illustrate how artifacts works with you and your research information systems, again to enhance the services that you're able to provide. We're quite eager to present our pilot program to you today, and are hopeful many of you will take us up on our offer. We're very interested in your feedback and questions, so please use the chat feature along the way to ask questions as they arise or during the open discussions portion of this at the back end. We'll do our best to address your questions before concluding today's session, and certainly we'll follow up wherever that's appropriate. And as Sheila has already mentioned, we will be asking a few polling questions along the way. So let's get started. We created artifacts really because too much valuable research information remains inaccessible and difficult to find, share, and reuse. You know, on our team on this call, particularly so, Jason and I have spent really the majority of our careers, you know, building information systems, databases, and software applications that are deployed by libraries across the world and used by literally millions of researchers. And the constant refrain that have learned, over that time is that while there's a great deal of valuable information in the form of published literature that's indexed, it really only represents a small portion or a minority of the research outputs that are produced, and that the access to that information is essential for purposes of validation and reuse and confirmation and credit. We've talked to many researchers who spend most of their careers generating data. It's been their skill set and their area of expertise, but they're not necessarily the ones who publish, or they're certainly not the lead publishers, and they're sort of they've been left behind, unable to receive recognition for the work that they've contributed. And so it's the untracked science where, these diverse outputs, or really artifacts as we call them, provide the information and the evidence that's essential for evaluating and verifying findings, reusing and building upon prior work. And until now, there really hasn't been an effective way for the library to make this research accessible to the stakeholders you support. So in essence, we created ARTiFACTS to eliminate barriers to this research, to enable your faculty to be recognized for their contributions and incorporate the very latest findings that strengthen their funding applications that your institution submits. So what does ARTiFACTS do, really? Well, we index this untracked research. We don't ignore the published, tracked, and indexed research at all, but our focus is on this untracked research so that it can be shared and discovered and fed into existing platforms. You will hear us use the word embed or integrate quite frequently, and that's because we recognize that it's important as a new provider in this ecosystem for us to help you leverage the investments that you've already made in those systems. We're not looking to recreate other systems, we're looking to complement those. And so to start off, we accomplish this by enabling pre-published research to be indexed efficiently. Now, currently there are, I think there are some 9 different ways that this hidden research can be linked with our system. These outputs can be claimed. Our system has an artificial intelligence engine that finds related research, and the users can claim and accept and say, I accept that, yes, these are my works. And as the system learns of those, it gets smarter. Important to emphasize here in our presentation today with lyricists about Orchid is that our system is synchronized with Orchid, and we'll show a bit of that in the demonstration period. Our system links with cloud storage services, and we connect with, or are certainly willing to chat with you about connecting with the variety of commonly used tools and repositories and services that are used at your institution, either by the library or by your research faculty. It's here where we handle sort of the technical stuff, some of which is blockchain related technical work, where we secure the provenance of research as it evolves. We achieve this by recording activity on the Bloxburg Consortium blockchain ledger. And now that ledger is independently operated by over 50 trusted university and research organizations globally, and was spearheaded by the folks at the Max Planck Digital Library in Germany. Our system assigns credit roles to ARTiFACTS, which improves the accuracy of identifying, collaborating, and citing the right experts based upon their specific contributions to an artifact. For example, if Jason and Emma and I have produced a data set of some sort, it may be that I bring the statistical expertise. It may be that Emma brings the coding expertise, and it may be that Jason brought the experimental design expertise to that particular work product. Well, those credit roles allow such different types of contributions to be specified. We allow DOIs to be created for artifacts, where these files, of course, as new works will, and not yet published or not yet formulated with a publication, haven't yet received a DOI. And importantly, we populate faculty profiles with their research outputs that are generated from the artifact system. And lastly, where we embed citations with reasons that enhance the intelligence that are incorporated with a citation, where if we are citing the work that one or many of you have contributed to, those reasons provide some rationale and explanation and some additional intelligence for why in the world we have cited your work, not just that we've cited it. We may have been able to reproduce. We may have been able to modify and enhance some aspect of work that you've previously shared. And it's worth mentioning that we're open to collaborating with the research community in establishing best practices in this area, because it's a very innovative service as it relates to citation indexing. We make this all of this work by, as I mentioned earlier, by connecting with existing systems and your workflows. Our system tracks file and metadata changes so that we preserve the provenance of these research artifacts, so that over the history of changes that a file may go through, it's possible for any who have an interest or need to verify the historical evolution of research, to be actually able to trace that through by the chaining together that our system does on these files. So as files change, as metadata associated with those files change, we retransact proof of existence transactions that connect and thread those together. And citation reporting of this untracked research truly is a perfect complement to the reporting available from conventional citation indexes, whether it be the Web of Science or Scopus or others that your library relies on, that when taken together, collectively, they provide a more complete and comprehensive picture of your institution's research impact. And the payoff? Well, the payoff for researchers in your organization is access to the very latest findings and evidence for reporting back to your faculty, to your deans, to research administrators, to incorporate with funding submissions, and also to the broader stakeholder community that all of your institutions speak to. And in this way, libraries can take a leadership role in opening access to these research data. So here we have our first poll question. And so let's begin with Orchid. Would you like to increase the adoption and use of Orchid among researchers at your institution? Yes? No? You're not sure? And not surprisingly, lots of yeses. And there are a few not sures, and I'm sure that Sheila in her upcoming webinar that she's giving in a few days or a couple of weeks, I think you gave that date earlier, we will be well positioned to address questions that those of you have about Orchid and how it can be of value across your institution. Very good. So Sheila, I think I will segue forward. So before Jason demonstrates, Jason and I demonstrate some of these capabilities, I should mention that ARTiFACTS is available for anyone to register and use at no charge. Ideally, the takeaways for you today will be first an understanding of how artifacts can work with your existing systems to enhance your library services. That's our main goal today. I want to point out that everything we're presenting today applies to universities, private research institutes, government agencies, and private charities that fund research, to publishers or university press, publishing organizations, and also corporations that conduct research. And thirdly, we most definitely want to make sure that we have addressed any and all of your questions about our pilot program. So with this as an introduction, let me turn the controls over to Jason and let him walk us through some of our live system.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Dave. Hey, I'm Jason here. I'm going to do exactly what Dave just said. I'm just going to do a quick intro.
Let me stop share.
Yeah, I think I can share now. Everyone can see my screen, hopefully.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. I guess I should turn off my camera as well. Is that what we're trying to do here? How do I do that now? Hold on. There we go. Okay. So as Dave said, the system is live, artifacts.ai. Anyone, we would encourage you to take a look at the system yourself. Hopefully we're going to pique your interest right now. You can see super easy login options, one click with all these tools that most of you already use. I happen to have an account with my email, so I'm going to go in here. And I'm just going to try to highlight, just jump around a little bit to try to highlight a couple things that that support those points that Dave just made on that last slide. We're really trying to demonstrate how we're confident that artifacts can help research libraries and the constituencies that you all share. So logging in here, and this is me. This is my account. Some of it's mostly my real stuff, but I also use this for demos. So you know, every single thing isn't set up exactly the way a real user might, but hopefully you'll still get a chance to have a flavor of it. And as I go through here, I will certainly pause, and hopefully you all will have some good questions or comments. And Dave, if there's any color commentary you want to add in, please jump in as well. So here's the main page, and as Dave mentioned, we have lots of content in here that is not exclusively, you know, indexed, peer-reviewed journal articles, which of course you can find many places. We have some of that, but we have all kinds of other research output in the system. And as Dave mentioned just a few minutes ago, there are a lot of really easy automated ways to get that stuff into the system, sort of to minimize typing. Some of that material we get from partners and from pulling things in from the web, and a lot of it's actually entered in by users. So I'll dive in here and show sort of what those artifacts look like. This is this AI stuff that Dave mentioned. These are actually things that I've worked on, that I've published, and the system has found these. Some of these are patents, some of these are articles. I have not claimed them, again, just because I want to be able to demo this to all of you. But if I did claim these, the system would then be able to get smarter and recommend things and so forth for me. What's maybe even a little bit more interesting, though, if we go into my citation, my artifacts here, this is where we have things that you wouldn't find in other databases at all. This happens to be a draft of a research paper that I've been working on with some colleagues and some of our users. We went ahead and put the draft here in case other users wanted to take a look at it. Maybe they would give us some feedback. We actually have a really detailed history of all the different versions of this draft that we've checked into the system. So that's, and we also have here, you can see that in many cases, even though these are not formally published documents, they still are being used and actually cited by other users. So that's, again, a unique aspect of the ARTiFACTS platform, where we can start to accrue and count and give that formal citation credit to users without having to go through, sort of the laborious and often very long sort of publishing process there. So those are ARTiFACTS. I want to also show here, if we can search for something. Here's an example of, this is something I use for. So here is another example of material that is not published, but this happens to be a data set. This is stored, this is a data set that is linked to an institutional repository. This happens to be an institutional repository from one of the institutional repositories from Max Planck Digital Library. So this is just a way for an example of integration where we have the metadata, and you can see a link here to this material that's also, of course, hosted and available in the institutional repository. But by linking through to ARTiFACTS, you can see we can start to accrue citations for this material, and it just expands the reach of the material that's stored in institutional repository. I think it's probably fair to say that most of you have institutional repositories. You probably spend a fair amount of your budget and effort in getting material into those systems. But in my experience, those systems really are not used as often as we might like. So that's something that ARTiFACTS can definitely help with there. Again, just sort of amplifying the reach of the material you have in your institutional repositories, and then also, again, helping to count the formal use and the citations. A couple of other major features here I'm just gonna touch on quickly. We have what are called workspaces, and workspace is sort of exactly what you might imagine. It's just a space where an individual or group of users can share material and just collaborate online. Here are some of the examples of different workspaces that I happen to be working on. Here's a partnership with some collaborators in Asia Pacific. Some of these are for specific journals where a large group of the journal authors have created a group where they can share ideas and collaborate on papers and so forth. We have dashboards as well, which are kind of cool. Here's a personal dashboard for me, and if we go out here, we have a couple of these dashboards that we're featuring for research journals. These happen to be for journals, but I think we could easily imagine that these could be an interactive dashboard for a university, for a specific research institute, maybe some of you in the audience support, or again, as Dave mentioned, for any kind of publishing organization within the university that you all work in. And these dashboards show kind of a cool view. These all different kinds of sort of widgets we could put here, but these are just some nice examples of article categories, sort of affiliation around the globe, keywords. And this here is again a unique aspect of ARTiFACTS, where we are tying the actual supporting artifact data sets and codes and so forth that are linked to the formal research articles that are published in this particular journal.
It's also, I think it's worth noting here, as Jason is showing both this public dashboard for JBBA's journal and the workspaces earlier, that those workspaces, well, the workspaces that we're viewing here are either those that we've created for our own use or are public workspaces that have been made available. It's certainly possible for research teams to work, behind, if you will, closed virtual doors, so that their work is shared only with those that they're collaborating with, and that's been an important aspect of the overall system design and architecture, where the users are in a position to determine when and with whom their research is shared. And of course, the broader information is shared, as Jason's showing here with public and private radio buttons. The broader information is shared, the more accessible it is, and more readily accessible it is for citations.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. That was a great point. Just a couple of other things I want to highlight quickly here. So I'm going to go into this section here in my preferences. We're not really trying to create a profile system necessarily, but we just sort of have this ability here for folks to customize things and mainly to sort of integrate with other systems that that we all use, Google Scholar, all kinds of other things here. Dave mentioned the word integration, which is a theme here that we're going to really push on. So ORCID, of course, we saw 91% of us here feel like we'd like to increase the usage of ORCID at our institutions, so that's great. So we can do that here. Again, I don't have this all exactly set up simply since I use this account to do all kinds of demos, but I could easily link my ORCID account, and we could have things sort of go back and forth between ORCID. That's another example of how how we integrate and make it really easy for users to get material into ARTiFACTS, and just for ARTiFACTS to be that much more integrated into the workspace, or sorry, the workflows.
Yeah, and I'm happy to show. I don't want to interrupt the middle of your demonstration. I'm happy to show how my account is synchronized and illustrate that once you're finished up.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. I wanted to just highlight a couple of other things here, again, along this theme of workflow integration, add-ons, Google Drive, Dropbox. I mean, we sort of have a growing list of different integrations here, which the team's always working on. Google Drive's a great one. I actually happen to be working on a collaborative paper right now with some users, and so this can show how really anything I have in my Google Drive I could easily bring in. So any of these sort of draft papers, data sets that we have associated with the research that we're doing, with just a couple clicks, we could bring this in, and I can keep it as private and secure as I like, or if there are things that I want to make public and allow others to build on and share, again, I can do that with just a couple quick clicks here. One other thing, again, on this theme of integration, we have quite a powerful set of APIs. So application programming interfaces, this is hosted on a popular API tool that's out on the web, but this makes it really just super easy for any kind of a developer or programmer to plug in with ARTiFACTS. And as Dave mentioned, we'd love to talk if anyone has any cool ideas about how we might integrate with either a project any of you are working on at your libraries or at your institutions, or if there's another tool out there, commercial tool or something community-based that your users are working on. We have a lot of this. It's really just plug and play and ready to go. So that is that. What else, Dave? I think those are sort of the highlights on those key points that you mentioned on your slide.
No, that's very good. Thanks, Jason. What we wanted to make this demonstration more relevant for those of you who are affiliated, in or affiliated with the library and such. Of course, there's a variety of end user oriented capabilities here, the ability to make a citation, to give a citation, and citations can be given from Workspaces. They can, we have a service that integrates with, for example, Google Docs, where citations that are recorded in the document or given from a workspace are actually recorded real time, so that in today's conventional published publishing ecosystem, Jason, Emma, and I might author a paper and it's published, and if it's published and indexed by an indexing service, others read it, learn of it, and then sometime later, after they've completed their research, they've written their paper, they've been published, they've been indexed, we receive a citation. Well, that could be 1 or 2 or more years down the road. In this ARTiFACTS environment, these citations are tracked and recorded real time. So what's really quite different and novel about ARTiFACTS is that it provides access to, again, heretofore hidden or inaccessible research outputs or artifacts, and we make those artifacts citable, as Jason is illustrating here, and that's done real time. I could give a citation to Jason or Emma from my workspace or from my Google Docs document, and it would record in their personal dashboard here instantly. Now, having said that, Jason, I'm happy to show a bit more of that Orchid integration.
Yeah, why don't I stop sharing and I will let you do that right
here. So let me bring this up. Okay, so here you've all seen this screen. Jason illustrated this. So in my case, I've synchronized with Orchid. It's just a matter of selecting this radio button. But to illustrate this synchronization, here's my own biography. Now, having said that, and as you'll notice, I'm a Wolverine. Hopefully that doesn't offend too many of you. I'm not an academic researcher. I very lightly published and such, but I wanted to highlight here in the Orchid Works section, because this is the area where we believe that we can be most supportive of the Orchid mission, generally so, and what Sheila is working to accomplish in collaborating with all of you. So in my Orchid Works file, in the case of these 2 records, I've entered, these are previous publications or conference papers that I've presented, and I've linked to those directly with my Orchid account. This one here, however, is one that came from ARTiFACTS. This document originated and captured and recorded it in ARTiFACTS, and through the synchronization, this 2-way synchronization service that we have in place, it automatically adds it to my Orchid Works file, and this is 2-way. So if I were to back in the ARTiFACTS environment, or in wherever this particular file happened to be stored, worked on that file and edited it, that revision would be reflected here as well. Similarly, these works are now reflected in, ARTiFACTS now knows of these works within the ARTiFACTS system, and as Jason mentioned earlier, this claiming capability monitors new works, and those would be new works that the system would recognize and learn about me. I wouldn't have to claim them because it automatically connects. So I think another important point to mention here as it relates to SciENcv is that, and you probably all already know this, but Orchid has a wonderful integration with SciENcv that ensures that all of the relevant profile and works related content in an individual's Orchid record are filled into the SciENcv format. And so we have this wonderful synchronization, where all research in artifacts that the creator wants reflected in their ORCID profile can be synchronized and reflected and maintained there currently, and maintained with currency. And then certainly when that individual needs to use that CV for any purpose, whether it's feeding into SciENcv or for other purposes, they have a current reference and record of their work products. So we're really very, very pleased that we've been successful in supporting all of the ORCID APIs, and this synchronization, this two-way synchronization, is the one that we think is perhaps the most relevant to illustrate here for today's discussion. So with that, let me tell you what, let me just pull this up behind and bring up our poll question 2, which is, if your institution hosts an institutional repository, what software system is being used? bpress, CCAN, Dataverse, DSpace, ePrints, Figshare, Alendora, Samvera, others you don't know. It's again, the rationale here is it's very helpful to us to understand what systems are deployed across your own organizations, and it gives us a better understanding of where we should spend more of our research time and attention. But having said that, if one of you works with, if one of you is using a different service that's not listed here and wish to collaborate with us in the pilot program, we're very happy to explore integrating with that service. It looks like DSpace is in the lead. Samvera is close, as well as bpress, close behind as well. Very helpful to see this, and a number of others. Yeah, about a quarter of these are others. Very helpful. Thank you. Well, Jason, here, why don't I let you address this slide, since you were speaking of, you showed a bit of our apiary and talked about our API services. Why don't I let you speak to this illustration of how we would integrate?
Yeah, of course. So hopefully we recognize on this slide, on the left-hand side, these bubbles. Dave had that animated at the beginning to sort of set the stage of all these, additional, file types and so forth that we collectively call artifacts, things that are, beyond, but also support, just the published and indexed research articles. So this idea of integrating into a CRIS system, which is, I think, something that's pervasive and very popular, certainly at research universities around the world. And we just have some examples of some of the popular systems. We haven't actually integrated with these systems, but our APIs are designed to be able to do that using very, very standard open source sort of technologies. So while right now, if your university has one of these systems, they certainly are primarily populated with research articles, almost exclusively. What ARTiFACTS here could do, as another example of us integrating with the tools that are out there, is we could use our APIs to help you integrate the stats, citation numbers, and so forth associated with all those other things in the larger bubble there, as we had just demonstrated that we have in the system. So that certainly could be, again, another unique aspect of ARTiFACTS, where we could really help you and your colleges and universities and other institutions and so forth get just a much more complete picture of the research outputs and their usage, and really a more nuanced view of all the work that, again, your constituents and researchers are doing, certainly beyond simply taking the journals that are in the Web of Science and counting citations there. So this is something that we feel is against something of high value, and also just gives a much more complete picture of the research work that's being done by members of your institutions.
Great, great, thanks. Thanks, Jason. An additional poll question here, third poll question. What CRIS system, what current research information system is used at your institution? With the options we have listed here: academic analytics, Converis, digital measures, Esploro, Interfolio, Mountain Pass, Pure, Symplectic, other, and don't know. Oh, a good number of others and a number of don't knows, actually. Yeah. Be curious that for the don't knows, it would be really interesting to learn whether there are no commercial CRIS systems at your institutions, or it may be that the part of the organization you're in just simply has no interaction or involvement with those systems. That may be the case. Yeah, very helpful. Well, here, in the interest of time, I will then let me move on and just highlight with these illustrations. So as Jason has shown, the activity displays for researchers can be tailored for public or private display. That's all in the individual's control. And unique views of cited reasons, pre-published outputs, citations by type of artifact, type of work product can be displayed. Very unique aspects of ways of providing views into this hidden research. And as it relates to research managers, the library is empowered to shape the views of this research activity for administrators who may be responsible for really managing research enterprise, particularly those focused on securing new funding awards. Research managers in this fashion can gain a view of these outputs in ways that heretofore have been unavailable, particularly pre-published work. And the nature of these collaborations as it relates to works that have yet to be published, but have been shared and collaborating on among and between specific different units, either within the institution or between institutions. And so from a research funding standpoint, we're interested to learn, whether and what research funding grant management system software is used at your institution. So Cayuse, Huron, InfoEd, Koali, Pivot, Proposal Central, WiseHive are some of the options here that we wanted to bring forward. And there certainly may be others that surface. So I'll give you a few seconds here to complete the poll. Pivot's quite popular, and a lot of don't knows. Yeah, very good. Thank you. And here, lastly, with these illustrations, the library is empowered to shape the views of this research activity, and so we're keenly interested in supporting you and in providing views that are tailored and custom to the views that are most relevant and most meaningful for administrators within your institution, for those of you who are managing the research information infrastructure, to see how this activity relates to the published literature activity that your institution, the faculty and research staff are producing, and such. And also this may nicely tie in with university presses, where this information can be shared and displayed, as Jason has shown earlier, in the examples of the public dashboards that some of our publishing clients have exposed. This may be an area where the library can facilitate access to this data by the university press. And so that sort of begs the question, I think we have one more question after this, but the question is, if your institution offers and has a university press operation, which digital research publishing software is used? Add-Upon, Editorial Manager, eJournal Press, Janeway, Manuscript Central, which is a ScholarOne system, OGS, and Silverchair. And I think I keep taking these down, but I think if I leave this up, you're also able to see what the responses are, which may be of interest to you as well. OJS, don't know, and other are dominating. Oh, very good. Very helpful. Thank you. Well, then let's segue the discussion and turn to our pilot program. In short, we're inviting you to partner with us, and the benefits that we want to highlight here are the following: long-term improvements in the grant submission process through increased ORCID registrations and usage. The more current and complete those ORCID profiles are, we believe is of great benefit for grant submissions, given the integration that ORCID has established with SciENcv and the fluid exportability, if you will. I'm not sure that's a word, but the ability to export ORCID profile information into other applications is of great benefit as it relates to grant submissions. And from our perspective, automatically updating those research files with the latest works and contributions that faculty have produced. Better documentation of this research activity through use of the core functionality that ARTiFACTS makes available, that our system makes available to your faculty. Seamless integration with the systems that are relied upon at your institution. In addition to ORCID, your institutional repository, your CRIS, and your press service, among others. And I'm certain there are others that we've not highlighted here, but we're very interested in discussing how ARTiFACTS can support those as well with you. And of course, an enhanced role for the library through a display of in-process research accomplishments that have not been available prior to, and your ability to leverage the investments that you've already made in those resources with the API services that ARTiFACTS together with ORCID can bring forward. The pilot program, the partner activities are as follows. From the ARTiFACTS side, we will pre-register the participants, those that you wish to have involved and participate in the pilot. We will scope and implement connectivity with the types of systems that we've illustrated and discussed here today. We will provide orientation and training sessions as often and as frequent as those are required. And certainly we would set an agreed upon schedule of those to make sure that all participants are fully briefed and acclimated to using the system, and then realizing and helping us deliver the right form and format of charts and graphics and analytics of the activity in the system. We would appoint a dedicated support team from start to finish. And we'd give priority access to new features, and certainly would give priority attention to new capabilities that were important for us to add into the system. ARTiFACTS is, although it's live and in use today, it's a dynamic system, and we continue to evolve and enhance it. From the university's perspective, I know I have university up here, but that could read organization based upon the different types of participants that are attending today. We would ask you to appoint a project lead and someone who could serve as a community advocate, if you will. An individual or an individual who would take the lead in confirming your priorities and desired objectives to make sure that we understood those and onboarded those. Someone who would be in a position to nominate and determine the user community for this pilot term, also the length of term. ARTiFACTS is amenable to as broad or as narrow a user community for this pilot as makes sense for you at your organization. Fourthly, to share user experiences, findings, and any assessments. We will most definitely facilitate that by offering survey questions and whatnot to efficiently collect feedback. But we're really interested in hearing from you and your user community, and ask that you acknowledge and be a reference account. The activity sequence is really quite straightforward. These general steps where we initially scope, together we scope and implement. We deploy and make the system available for use and provide support throughout, putting you in a position to evaluate and assess for yourselves the utility and the impact that the system has and the potential it has. And upon success, put you in a position to license the system. So program terms are really quite simple. Mutual agreement on time frame and success metrics, public acknowledgement of participation. We'd very much like to identify you as a participant, and perhaps from an economic perspective, important to point out that there is no initial cost for participating. There's no cost for participating in the pilot program, and we would make an early adopter discount available upon a successful completion of the pilot if you were to then choose to adopt and use the system going forward. So with that, let me present our last polling question. Simple question: are you interested in partnering with ARTiFACTS? Yes. I'll skip over no. No, but yes, no, or want to learn more. You'd like to learn more. Lots of learn mores, and that's to be expected. Very good. Thank you, everyone. Well, with that, let's open this up to questions and discussion. We're happy to take. Well, we have a few minutes here, but I have not been watching the chat window. Sheila.
Hi, Dave. Yeah, I've got several questions that people have sent to me. So I'm just going to go through those in the order they were received. And I do just want to say before we get too close to the hour, if anyone does have to leave at the hour, feel free to do that. If your question doesn't get answered, we will follow up with you after and send a summary of the Q&A when we send the recording as well. So don't feel like you're missing anything if you do have to leave, but for those who can stay on, feel free to do that too. And any questions at this time, feel free to chat those in to me and we'll get those added to the list too. So lots of questions. First one, what metadata schema does ARTiFACTS use to co-locate all of the different artifacts?
Great question. Jason, do you want to start that?
I can try. Sure. Yeah, I don't know that we are following a very specific metadata schema necessarily. I mean, we're using following general best practices. I mean, we do try to normalize the metadata that we have, certainly for anything that's published that we get in from existing systems. And in the UI, we encourage users to fill out as much metadata as they can, so things are just that much more complete. But certainly, in working with some of the partnerships we've done, where mainly with journals where they've had metadata for their articles or for their data sets, we've worked with them to make sure that they are sort of happy that metadata is complete, and in some cases we've given them suggestions on how to enhance that as we pull that data into the system.
Okay, so it sounds like you would be open to potentially making adjustments depending on what different organizations need in terms of metadata.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, virtually every organization we've worked with, we have found ourselves making some accommodations. We have a very broad, I want to say, I'll say comprehensive, broad metadata, set of metadata fields, and we do find ourselves accommodating modifications, oftentimes for the purpose of importing and normalizing. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, next question. How is it possible to assign metadata and apply preservation techniques to files in a relatively ephemeral storage system, like, for example, Google Drive? How does that work?
Right. So, with Google Drive specifically, actually any of the file stores, I think it's important to point out that it's not necessary. In fact, it's a preference that files themselves not be stored on ARTiFACTS servers. Our clients generally prefer to have to rely on their own preferred, sometimes proprietary file servers. And with Google Drive, as with other file stores, what our system does is our system, either through their API or through our API, we routinely check on file changes, and whether a file changes, whether metadata for that file is modified, our system chains together the provenance of those modifications. Now, the word ephemeral there suggests that files can be moved from one location to another, and that's a challenge where the way the ARTiFACTS system addresses those is, if a file moves from Google Drive, if I get your question right, if a file moves from Google Drive to let's say OneDrive, our system would drop off, would lose the chain of connection between that file on Google Drive, and would pick up a new file, a new artifact on the OneDrive section, because those are very disparate systems. I'm not sure that addresses your question, but there's probably more to discuss there that's underlying your question.
Okay, great, thanks. The next question is asking to explain a little bit more about the artificial intelligence, the AI claiming engine, and what exactly is that engine doing?
Sure. Well, let me I'll give a broad brush to that, and Jason, maybe you can augment. So really, what we're doing is we're interrogating all of the metadata that we can see that's associated with that artifact. And so it's primarily metadata driven, and our learning engine attempts to what it does is it identifies unique terms unique, and we build a taxonomy behind that, that as our system sees new terms and associates them with existing terms within that artifact and then makes connections, what our system is able to do is then for that individual, where the system now has learned something about them, either through the import of their works in their ORCID file, or other publications that our system knows that they have claimed. What our AI engine does is it relies on that metadata to infer and then run queries to identify other potential matches for that same individual. If that addresses your question, and Jason, you may want to, you may have other comments to augment that with.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just, it starts with just the core metadata, as Dave mentioned, but we do have a social graph as well. So we're looking at citation relationships and other types of affiliations and relationships. And just like most machine learning or AI, I mean, really, it gets smarter the more it's used. So you saw, if you remember in my little demo, I didn't actually claim all those things, but if I did claim them, that's just additional information that's run through the algorithms to make it smarter. And the more I interact with the system, if I collaborate in a workspace, if I cite others' work, all of that, all those interactions go into the social graph and help to make the AI smarter.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what does artifacts count as a citation, and how are those citations calculated?
Great question. There are several ways in which a citation can be given in using artifacts. Well, the two specific that we mentioned earlier in the discussion are if an individual is authoring within Google Docs, we have an integration with the browser there that tracks a citation, so that if I'm writing a paper and I call up a reference that is known to the artifacts system, so I may be citing some work that Jason has done. I may be citing a data set that Emma has created, or a protocol that a different individual has shared with the artifacts community. When I cite that in my Google Docs draft, it not only handles the bibliographic formatting within that Google Docs document, but it records a citation onto the Bloxburg ledger, and that citation is counted as one that I have given, and one that the individual or individuals that I have that are associated as contributors, that are contributors to that particular artifact, will receive a citation, and that is recorded in our system as a citation. So and similarly that same workflow or that same process is followed when a citation is given from, for example, a workspace, where a group of us may be collaborating in a workspace and we choose to cite a colleague's artifact. Again, when we cite, the system records that we have given a citation, and the system records that the individual or individuals associated with that artifact have received one. So that's the notion of citation that our system is tracking.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, next question. So in terms of like connecting with a repository, does artifacts link through to the repository, or do you actually harvest documents that are in the repository and pull those actual documents into artifacts? How does that work?
Yeah, oh, that's an excellent question. And the answer is it works the way in which you would like it to work. We will make it work in the way in which you would like it to work. We believe that there's great utility in enabling faculty and researchers at your institution to very efficiently be able to have files and work products that they have created hosted on your institutional repository. And we also, and so one of several ways this integration can work is that what we would engineer for you is a mechanism that would allow faculty to be able to post directly from artifacts to your institutional repository. Some organizations have prefer a different model where there's a mediated process where a faculty member might promote something to be posted onto the IR, but based upon your internal workflow processes, you'd like that to be mediated and, if you will, approved and then advanced onto the IR. We can support that workflow. But then the other direction, which is where there are already many works that sit on your IR, we would love to be able to support the integration where our system indexes those works, and by doing so exposes them in a way where they too can receive citations. So, so for example, if the three of us, Jason, Emma, and I, are researchers at your institution, and we have a number of artifacts already on the IR, by exposing them or enabling artifacts to recognize them, they can be exposed for discovery by other researchers, and then in turn be cited. And when they're cited, of course, the artifact system tracks and records and counts those and reports them back to the faculty as well as the library.
Okay, great, thanks. The next question I have is asking about storage limits in artifacts in terms of things like especially data sites and code. Are there storage limits? How does that work? If people want to store their large files in artifacts.
Yes, there are. Gosh, that's a great question. I should know, maybe Jason, you remember, I should know off the top of my head, there is an upper limit on file size. There's no restriction on file type in terms of storing a file on artifacts, but there's no limit whatsoever on our ability to process a proof of existence or citation transaction on a file that happens to be stored on some third-party system. We make storage available in artifacts as a convenience for our users, but as I mentioned earlier, it's oftentimes the case where researchers and their institutions prefer to have their data stored in other services.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, because we had another question about basically asking to clarify whether files are actually stored in artifacts or just linked. And I think you had mentioned, yeah, you can store files there, but preferably they're linked to other systems. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's no requirement that files be stored on our system. No.
Okay, great. A couple more questions, and thanks to those who are sticking on with us. Okay, so people often keep private data in their Google Drive, Dropbox, etc. Is there a way to allow researchers to use those add-ons but block access to particular folders?
Sure. And I realize we went through the demonstration, rather quickly. The user, the owner of that Google Drive folder, can select specific files within folders, specific folders, or a folder among multiple folders, and only link those selected ones with artifacts. So for myself, I enjoy cooking, and so I have a Google Drive folder, full of recipes. I'm not that I'm a very good cook, but and so that's a folder that I have not integrated with artifacts, and so I've simply not checked that in the selection of folders as an example.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, just a few more questions. One was asking for clarification around how to add artifacts items to ORCID. And I know that, you showed that example of a work from artifacts being written to your ORCID record with the source as artifacts, but the person asking the question said that they didn't see that as an option in the work section. And I'm not sure if they were looking at, yes, Larissa, you can also feel free to unmute yourself if you would like at this point. But Larissa, were you looking in your ORCID record, or did you create a artifacts profile and we're looking in there?
So I think this,
yeah.
Yep. So I think part of this is just me kind of confused how it fits in, but I went to ORCID and went to the work section on my profile to see if there was an option to link to artifacts there, because that's how I've input a bunch of other things into my ORCID, and I didn't see artifacts on the list of things that we can link to, like we can with Scopus and things like that.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's great. We'll take that back, Larissa. Thank you so much for that request or question. We'll take that back to ORCID. Right now, the way that that you would connect your ORCID Works records with artifacts is done from the artifacts side by selecting that synchronization option that I displayed earlier.
Yeah, so I think, Larissa, what you're thinking about are the search and link wizards within your ORCID record, and artifacts is not one of those currently. So that's why you didn't see it. You would have to go into your artifacts profile and do it from there. But that's certainly something, Dave, that you might explore with ORCID for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. That's great.
Okay, next question. Is there an about page on the Artifacts website that has background information about like the platform, the people involved, funding, organizations involved, that kind of thing? I think we had somebody who was trying to find a page with that information and couldn't find it. So do you have maybe a link or something you could share?
There's information about the team, the core team, our advisory group, some of our client relationships. I actually don't believe that there's funding information there, but certainly would be happy to pick up that conversation with you offline, and to make sure that we're addressing any and all questions you have about us. That I don't have the website up at the moment, but I could probably point you more specifically to where to look on the website.
Okay, yeah, and we can share that link out when we share out the recording. And then I just realized that there was one question that I accidentally skipped over. And this is the last question, which is, what tools is Artifacts building on? And the person mentioned, for example, the IMLS funded Share project. Not sure if that rings any bells, or if that question makes sense.
Right. So I'm not familiar with that particular project, but I think that the question here is, what's the underlying technology? What are some of the underlying technology and tools that we're using? Is that right?
I think so, yeah. And we can follow up with the person who asked the question too, just in case that doesn't answer it, because I think they've left the call.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to. I actually have let me see if I happen to have something, some of that reference material here. Well, so no, it's, oh gosh, it's not, unfortunately not on that slide. We'll fill that a bit of that detail in to explain some of the tools and technology platform systems that that we're using, just to address that question. That can be included in the notes that you send out to everyone.
Okay, that sounds perfect. Well, that's all the questions that I received. Did y'all receive any other questions that I haven't gotten to?
Let me look.
No, I haven't received any.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks all for joining and watching.